Hello Art 4 students, I'm back. You guys just wrapped up creating thumbnail sketches as possible ideas for your project, and now it's time to create a rough draft. In order to do that, I'm going to help you measure out the dimensions for the wall that we'll be working on eventually. And it's 7.5 by 7.5. Those are the dimensions that we have to work with. So I'm going to help you measure it out on this paper so that there's a little bit of a border all the way around, because on the final design that you come up with, I am going to ask you guys to have a nice even measured border on it. So we might as well figure out how to do that here with the rough draft, okay? So the bottom of the paper is 9 inches, and so we have just enough room to put 7.5 in here. So I'm going to walk you through this. You can do this with me. At the bottom of the paper, I'm going to line up my ruler so that the starting position, the 0, is on the edge of the paper. And then I'm going to measure over 1/2 inch. So that's just this line right here. And then I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do the same thing. And then I'm going to connect those two lines. And now, all along this edge, it's an even 1/2 inch, because I measured it in 2 places. Now I'm going to do the same thing over here. And down here. Now that I have those 2 lines, I'm going to measure 7.5 this way and 7.5 that way. So I lined up the starting position on my ruler with this new line that I created, and I'm going to go 7.5 over. Then I'm going to come up here. I'm going to draw a line. So I did 2 measured marks, and I'm going to do a line. This is wider than 1/2 inch. This is obviously looks wider than it does over here. That's okay. I'm going to fix that in a minute. Now I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to do 7.5 over here, 7.5 down here, so 2 measured marks, one right there, one right there. They're both 7.5 away from this line. Okay, away from this line, 7.5 over. Because I measured in 2 different places on both ends, all the way across is correct, okay? So all the way across, that's 7.5, 7.5, 7.5. Okay, so now I want to make the border measured again. So this is not 1/2 inch. I'm going to make it 1/2 inch. So I'm going to use my ruler, measure from this new box line that I created, measure 1/2 inch over. Same thing up here on the other side of the line, 1/2 inch over. A little bit of an extra line I can erase there. Then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I do 1/2 inch, and then 1/2 inch, make a line. Okay, so now what we're seeing now, hopefully this makes sense to everybody, is we're seeing the inside space is where our actual picture is going to go. Then this border that goes around is just a nice clean border, like a frame, to make it a little bit more presentable. And then this space outside of that frame is simply extra. It's just extra paper that we're going to get rid of eventually. So I could scribble that out of existence here just to show that it doesn't belong. None of that belongs, okay? So that's the border that you need to measure before you do the rough draft. And we definitely need the 7.5 by 7.5 square. That's an equal measured square that each corner is at 90-degree angles. And I know that because I used the edge of the paper to make these lines. And we need that space because that's going to be the real dimensions of the mini mural that you create later. Okay, now I'm actually ready to draw my rough draft. And just like you guys did thumbnail sketches to prepare for this rough draft, I am going to use some of my sketches and develop my final idea in here with these thumbnail sketches. So I'm going to use a combination of these. I developed this one. It's supposed to be sort of like a weird portal to another place. This one kind of is funny shape, but inside of it is a landscape. I have this weird twisted shape thing. I don't know if you can see that very well. I have this spacey scene that sort of looks like a black hole and some meteors. I have this guy, stuff coming out of his hands, and I have this weird archway thing. And so I have a image in my head of how I think that this is going to go, but I'm going to basically combine different elements of all of these into one artwork. And so when I'm done, you might be able to notice some of these thumbnail sketches and like different aspects of them in here, and some of them you might not, but all of them will have influenced me a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video and just show you the drawing process, and I might talk here and there, but I'm just going to go ahead and start drawing now, okay? Okay, so as far as a rough draft goes, I think that I'm finished. I've actually gone a little bit further with it than I really need to. I added in some shading details. That was really just for me. I did that because it helps me figure out how the different shapes and details are going to work. But if I can get away with just making it a line drawing like I did up here, then that's really good enough. Because what we're going to do next is we're going to take this drawing and we're going to transfer it onto a new piece of paper for the final artwork. You might be wondering why we're going to transfer it onto a new piece of paper. The reason is because I really think that starting fresh for the final is really important. I can get rid of all of my eraser marks, all of my mistakes. I can get rid of all of the thick pencil lines. I can get rid of all of my shading, and I can just start with a lightly traced outline of all of the shapes so that I can then go into the color process. And I'm going to be showing you that next.